She found 20 men in black coats standing in a perfect circle around her father's grave at midnight. The pale stranger at the center placed a blood-red rose on the tombstone and whispered, "Your father saved my life." What she didn't know, the debt he came to repay would bind her fate to his forever, and both vampires and humans would hunt her for it. The cemetery gates shouldn't have been open at midnight. Arya Chin stood at the rusted entrance of Hollow Grove Cemetery, her father's funeral program still crumpled in her coat pocket. 1 week. It had been exactly 1 week since they'd lowered Daniel Chun into the cold Massachusetts earth, and she hadn't been able to sleep through a single night. The insomnia wasn't from grief alone, though God knows there was plenty of that. It was the dreams. Every night, the same vision. Her father standing at the foot of her bed, lips moving urgently, but no sound coming out. Behind him, shadows stretched across her bedroom wall, taking the shape of men in long coats. So here she was, at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, walking through an unlocked cemetery gate that the groundskeeper swore he locked every evening at 6. The October air bit through her thin jacket as she navigated the winding path toward her father's plot. Dead leaves crunched under her sneakers. In the distance, the old oak tree near her father's grave swayed in the wind, its branches scraping the sky like skeletal fingers. She'd brought a thermos of coffee, her father's favorite, the kind he'd make every Sunday morning with too much sugar and a splash of cream. It was stupid, maybe, but grief made you do stupid things.
Made you talk to headstones.
Made you drive 40 minutes in the middle of the night because you couldn't stand the silence in your apartment anymore. Arya rounded the final curve in the path, and her footsteps faltered. The oak tree wasn't swaying alone. 20 figures stood in a perfect circle around her father's grave, so still they could have been statues. Each wore a long black coat that fell to their ankles, the fabric untouched by the wind that whipped through the cemetery. Their faces were pale, impossibly pale, catching the silver light of the full moon like polished marble. The thermos slipped from Arya's hand, coffee splashing across the path. None of them moved. None of them even seemed to breathe. At the center of the circle, directly over her father's headstone, knelt a man who made the others look ordinary. His hair was jet black, falling past his shoulders in a way that should have looked unkempt, but instead seemed deliberately wild. He wore the same black coat, but his was fastened with silver buttons that gleamed like stars. Even from 20 feet away, Arya could see his skin had an otherworldly quality, not just pale, but luminescent, as if lit from within. He held something in his hand, a rose, blood-red and fresh, as if it had just been cut. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and sprint back to her car. But her feet stayed planted to the ground, and her voice, when it finally came, sounded stronger than she felt. "What the hell are you doing at my father's grave?" 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her in perfect unison. The movement was too synchronized, too fluid, too inhuman. The kneeling man didn't look up immediately. Instead, he placed the red rose carefully on the granite headstone, his fingers lingering on the carved letters of her father's name, Daniel Chun, beloved father and friend. "Debt must be repaid in full," the man said softly, his voice carrying across the distance with impossible clarity. It had a musical quality, like wind chimes made of crystal. "I asked you a question." Arya's hand crept toward her phone in her pocket. "I'm calling the police. They won't come in time." The man finally looked up, and Arya's breath caught in her throat. His eyes were red. Not bloodshot, not brown catching the light wrong. Pure crimson, like rubies held up to flame. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Your father saved my life," he continued, rising to his feet in one smooth motion. He was tall, at least 6'3", and moved with a predator's grace. 20 years ago, Daniel Chun gave me something no one else would. A chance. "My father didn't know anyone like you," but even as she said it, Arya remembered the locked study. The drawer her father never let her open. The way he'd sometimes stare out the window at night, watching the street as if expecting someone. The man took a step forward, and the circle of figures shifted with him, maintaining their perfect formation. He knew me better than anyone. He was the only human who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a monster. Human. The word slipped out before Arya could stop it. A sad smile crossed the man's face. My name is Valen Aurelius. I am, or was, the king of the Eastern Vampire Courts. He gestured to the figures around him. These are my guards. We've come to fulfill an oath your father and I made 2 decades ago. Arya laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Vampires.
Right.
And I suppose you're here to drink my blood. No, Miss Jen. Valen's expression turned deadly serious. We're here to protect it. Your father saved my life when my own kind had sentenced me to death. In return, I swore a blood debt, eternal protection for his bloodline. For you. The wind picked up, and one of the guards' coats billowed open. Arya caught a glimpse of what looked like weapons, not guns, but blades of an antique design, handles wrapped in leather that had clearly seen centuries of use. You're insane, she whispered, but her voice shook. All of you. Valen tilted his head, studying her. Your father told me you were stubborn, that you'd inherited his skepticism along with his courage. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, tossing it toward her. Arya caught it instinctively. It was a pocket watch, old and tarnished, with an intricate pattern engraved on the cover. She'd seen it before. Her father had kept it on his desk, though she'd never seen it work.
Open it, Valen said.
Her hands trembled as she pried open the cover. Inside, beneath the frozen watch hands, were initials carved into the silver. V.A. Valen Aurelius. He kept it all these years, Valen murmured, something like wonder in his voice. Even when I told him he didn't have to. Arya looked up, and in that moment, she saw past the red eyes and pale skin to the grief etched in the vampire's face. Whatever he was, whatever this was, his sorrow was real. Why now? She asked. Why come to his grave now? Because the debt isn't settled, Miss Jen. And there are others, both human and vampire, who would see you dead to ensure it never will be. Valen's eyes blazed brighter. Your father protected me once. Now it's my turn to protect you, whether you want me to or not. Before Arya could respond, one of the guards suddenly stiffened. Sire, the figure said, a woman's voice, sharp with warning. We're being watched. Valen's head snapped toward the tree line, and Arya followed his gaze. For just a moment, she saw them. 3 more figures in the shadows between the trees, these ones crouched and ready to spring. Run, Valen said quietly. What? Run. The shadows exploded into motion, and Arya finally did what her instincts had been screaming at her to do since she'd first seen the circle of men in black coats. She ran. Arya's lungs burned as she burst through her apartment door at 2 a.m., slamming it behind her and throwing the deadbolt. Her hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the chain lock in place. She'd run. God, how she'd run. Through the cemetery, past rows of headstones that blurred together in the moonlight, her feet pounding against the gravel path while inhuman shrieks echoed behind her. She hadn't dared look back, not when she heard the sound of bodies colliding, not when something that sounded like metal rang out in the darkness, not even when a voice that might have been Valen's shouted something in a language she didn't recognize. She'd reached her car, peeled out of the parking lot, and driven home 15 miles over the speed limit, checking her rearview mirror every 3 seconds. Nothing had followed her. At least, nothing she could see. Now, standing in her small Boston apartment with her back pressed against the door, Arya tried to convince herself it had all been some kind of hallucination. Stress-induced psychosis. A grief-triggered breakdown. Except the pocket watch was still in her hand, warm and solid and real. She stumbled to her bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, avoiding her own eyes in the mirror. When she finally looked up, she barely recognized herself, hair wild, mascara smeared, face pale as those things in the cemetery. Not real, she whispered to her reflection. Not real, not real, not real. She repeated it like a mantra as she changed into pajamas, as she checked every window lock twice, as she wedged a chair under her bedroom doorknob. She was still repeating it when she finally collapsed onto her bed, still fully dressed under the covers, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building made her jump. Every shadow seemed to move. When dawn finally broke through her curtains, Arya felt like she'd aged 10 years in one night. She dragged herself out of bed, made coffee with shaking hands, and tried to pretend everything was normal. She made it 3 steps toward her front door before she saw it. A black rose lay on her doormat, its petals so dark they seemed to absorb the light. A drop of what looked like morning dew clung to one petal, except when Arya bent closer, she realized it wasn't dew at all. It was red. Next to the rose lay a sealed envelope, made of thick cream-colored paper that looked like it belonged in a museum. Her father's name was written across it in elegant, flowing script: Daniel Chen, keeper of the old ways. Arya's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She snatched up the envelope with trembling hands and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same antique quality, covered in that same beautiful handwriting. To the one who gave me life, I return what was owed. The debt spans 20 years, but blood remembers what time forgets. Your daughter carries your courage and your curse. I will not fail you, old friend. Those who hunt in the dark already know she exists. They will come for her, as they once came for you. But where you stood alone, she will not. The circle holds. The oath remains. Until the debt is settled, V.A. Arya read it 3 times, her mind racing. The handwriting was old-fashioned, the kind people used with fountain pens and careful practice, not the hasty scrawl of modern times. The paper itself felt ancient, slightly rough under her fingers. But it was the words that made her blood run cold. Your curse. What curse? Her father had been a high school history teacher, for God's sake. He'd coached her soccer team. He'd made terrible dad jokes and burned every Thanksgiving turkey. He hadn't been cursed. He hadn't known vampire kings. He hadn't. Arya's thoughts stuttered to a halt as she remembered something. The locked study. After the funeral, she'd been too grief-stricken to go through her father's things, but now. She grabbed her keys and was out the door in minutes, the letter clutched in her hand. Her father's house was only 20 minutes away, a modest 2-story in Cambridge that always smelled like old books and pine. Arya's hands shook as she unlocked the door, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as she stepped inside. The study was on the 2nd floor, door still locked as it had been since her father's death. Arya had inherited his key ring, and she fumbled through them until she found the small brass key he'd never let her touch. The lock clicked open. The study was exactly as she remembered. Desk covered in papers, bookshelves crammed with history texts, filing cabinet in the corner. But now she looked at it with new eyes, searching for anything that seemed out of place. The pocket watch. She still had it in her jacket. Arya pulled it out and set it on her father's desk, staring at those frozen hands, at the initials carved inside. And then, impossibly, it began to tick. The sound was soft but distinct in the quiet house. Tick, 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 marking seconds that it hadn't counted in years. The hands trembled, then jerked into motion, sweeping forward as if making up for lost time. Arya stumbled backward, knocking into the filing cabinet. Her elbow hit something, and she heard a dull thud from inside the bottom drawer, a drawer that shouldn't have anything in it because her father had always kept it locked separately. Now it swung open an inch, revealing a manila folder marked with a single word in her father's handwriting: Valen. Outside, the late morning sun climbed higher in the sky, but in the study's window, reflected in the glass, Arya caught a glimpse of movement on the street below. A figure in a black coat stood beneath the oak tree across from her father's house, perfectly still. Watching. The figure was gone by the time Arya pressed her face against the window. Just an empty street, autumn leaves skittering across the pavement. No sign that anyone had been there at all. She grabbed the manila folder with shaking hands and was about to open it when 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house.
Aria frose.
The knocks came again, patient, measured, from the front door downstairs. She crept down the stairs, folder clutched to her chest, and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. Valen Aurelius stood on her father's porch in broad daylight. He looked different in the morning light, or rather, he looked exactly the same, which was the problem. Same pale skin, same dark hair, same impossible perfection. He wore a different coat now, charcoal gray instead of black, but his eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Miss Chun," he said without raising his voice, somehow knowing she was watching. "I mean you no harm. I only wish to talk." "Go away," Arya called through the door. "I understand your fear." "I said go away, or I'm calling the police." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Your father would have said the same thing. The first time we met, he pulled a gun on me." A hint of a smile touched Valen's lips.
He was
Remarkably difficult to convince. Despite herself, Arya cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. "The sun doesn't hurt you." "No," Valen removed his sunglasses, revealing those crimson eyes. In daylight, they looked almost burgundy, like dark wine. "That particular myth causes us endless amusement. We simply prefer the night. Easier to move unseen." "What do you want?" "To fulfill my oath to your father." Valen's expression turned serious. "Those figures you saw last night, they weren't my people. They were trackers from the Western courts. They know about you now, Miss Chun. They know you're the last of Daniel Chen's bloodline." "Why would they care?" "Because killing you would void the blood debt. And certain vampires would very much like to see that happen." He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the quiet street. "May I come in? This conversation would be better had inside."
Arya laughed harshly.
"You really think I'm going to invite a vampire into my father's house?" "Another myth, I'm afraid." "We don't need invitations," Valen tilted his head. "Though it's polite to ask." Before Arya could respond, he simply walked through the door. Not through the wood itself, but faster than her eyes could follow. One moment he was outside, the next he stood in her father's foyer, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. Arya stumbled backward, and suddenly a small canister was in her hand, pepper spray she'd grabbed from her purse. She aimed it at him with trembling hands. "Stay back." Valen raised his hands slowly. "Miss Chun." She sprayed him directly in the face. He didn't even flinch. The spray hit him full on, and he just stood there, blinking once, then twice. A drop of the chemical ran down his cheek like a tear. "That was unpleasant," he said mildly, "but ultimately ineffective." Arya's mind raced. Sunlight didn't work. Pepper spray didn't work. What else? She backed toward the kitchen where her father kept. "The knife block won't help either," Valen said, tracking her thoughts with unnerving accuracy. "Nor the iron skillet, the fire extinguisher, or the supposedly blessed crucifix your father kept in the drawer. Daniel tried them all." That sad smile again. "He was very thorough." "Then how did he—" Arya stopped, realizing what she was about to ask. How did her father force a vampire king to make a deal? What kind of leverage did a high school teacher have? "Your father didn't threaten me, Miss Chen. He saved me." Valen moved to the living room and sat in the armchair, her father's chair, with easy familiarity. 20 years ago, the vampire courts went to war. Old alliances crumbled, new powers rose, and I made enemies. Powerful ones. He leaned back and for a moment looked ancient, carrying the weight of centuries. The tribunal sentenced me to execution by sun's taking, left bound in silver chains to burn in the dawn. They placed me in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, expecting me to turn to ash with the sunrise. "But you didn't," Arya said quietly, drawn into the story despite herself.
"No."
"Because at 5:47 a.m., a history teacher named Daniel Chen broke through a padlocked door with a crowbar," Valen's voice softened with memory. He'd been tracking unusual activity in the area for weeks. He had theories about the supernatural, notebooks full of research. He thought he was saving a kidnapping victim. And when he realized what you were, he didn't run, didn't scream. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Well, you're definitely not in my American history curriculum." Valen laughed, a sound of genuine warmth. Then he threw a tarp over me, loaded me into a station wagon, and drove me to safety. Arya sank onto the couch, the folder still in her hands. "That's insane. Your father was many things, Miss Chen. Sane was occasionally not one of them." Valen leaned forward. "He hid me for 3 days while the tribunal searched, fed me, listened to my story, and then, when it was safe, he helped me contact allies who could protect me. He didn't ask for payment, didn't want power or immortality. He just said, everyone deserves a fair trial, even vampires. So you swore to protect his family." "I swore a blood debt, the most sacred oath in vampire culture. Your father's life and bloodline became bound to mine. His safety, my responsibility. His death." Valen's eyes darkened. I felt it the moment his heart stopped. Every vampire linked to me felt it. And they knew. Knew what? That the debt now falls to you. Valen stood, suddenly tense. "And that makes you either the most protected or most hunted human in North America." A sound came from outside, tires screeching, multiple vehicles. Valen moved to the window in a blur, his whole body going rigid. "They've found us." "Who?" The living room window exploded inward in a spray of glass. Valen was in front of her before the glass finished falling, his body a shield between Arya and whatever had crashed through the window. Not something, someone. A pale figure crouched in the wreckage, eyes glowing amber in the dim light. "Western Court," Valen hissed. "Arya, get down." But she was already moving, instinct driving her toward the stairs. Another window shattered, the kitchen this time. Then the back door splintered with a sound like a gunshot. "The study."
Arya screamed.
"There's a—" She didn't finish. Valen grabbed her around the waist, and suddenly they were moving faster than physics should allow, the world blurring around them. She felt a moment of weightlessness, then they were in her father's study, the door slamming shut behind them. Valen shoved the heavy desk against the door. "That won't hold them long." The window. Arya started toward it, but Valen caught her arm. "There are 3 more outside. We're surrounded." His eyes scanned the study with tactical precision. "Is there another way out?" Arya's mind raced. Her father's house, the home she'd grown up in. She knew every corner, every. "The attic," she said. "There's a crawl space that connects to the neighbor's roof. Dad showed me when I was 10, said it was our secret escape route at the time. She thought he was being paranoid."
"Now."
Crashes and snarls echoed from downstairs. The desk scraped against the floor as something heavy hit the door. "Go," Valen ordered. "I'll hold them. You'll die." "I'm harder to kill than you'd think." He glanced at the folder still clutched in her hands. "Take that. Whatever your father kept about me, you need to read it. To understand." The door cracked. Inhuman screams filled the air. Arya made a split-second decision. She grabbed Valen's hand. His skin was cool, like marble, and pulled him toward the bookshelf. Dad didn't make just one escape route. Come on. She yanked a specific book, A History of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and the bookshelf swung inward with a soft click, revealing a narrow passage behind the wall. Valen stared. "Your father was full of surprises. You have no idea. Move." They squeezed into the passage just as the study door exploded inward. Arya pulled the bookshelf closed behind them, plunging them into darkness. She heard Valen's steady breathing beside her, or rather, she didn't. He wasn't breathing at all. "There's a ladder about 10 feet ahead," she whispered, fumbling in the dark. Her hand found the metal rungs. "Leads to the attic." The crawl space exits through a loose panel on the east side. They climbed in silence, Arya's heart hammering, the sounds of destruction growing muffled below them. When they reached the attic, dusty light filtered through gaps in the roof panels. Arya led them across creaking boards, careful to step only on the support beams like her father had taught her. Behind them, she heard wood splintering. They'd found the passage. Here, she pried open the loose panel, and cold morning air rushed in. Beyond was a 6-foot gap to the neighbor's roof, an easy jump for a child playing adventure games. Now, looking at the drop to the concrete driveway below, it seemed insane. Valen looked at the gap, then at Arya. Trust me. Before she could ask what he meant, he'd picked her up like she weighed nothing and leaped. They sailed across the gap with impossible grace, landing silently on the neighbor's roof. Valen set her down gently, and they ran, jumping from roof to roof until they were 3 houses down. Only then did he stop, listening intently. They're not following, he said finally. They'll search the house, find nothing, and report back. We have maybe an hour. Arya's legs gave out, and she sat hard on the shingles, the folder still miraculously in her grip. Her whole body shook with adrenaline. What the hell was that? An assassination attempt. Crude and desperate. Not the Western court's usual style, Valen frowned, scanning the horizon. Someone wants you dead quickly, before I can fully protect you. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. Arya looked at the folder in her hands, her father's handwriting stark across the tab. I'm a data analyst. I work in a cubicle. I eat lunch at the same sandwich shop every day. I'm not part of some vampire war. You are now. Valen sat beside her, somehow looking regal even on a suburban roof. Open it. With trembling hands, Arya opened the folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. The first showed a young man in World War I uniform standing next to a figure she recognized immediately. Valen, looking exactly as he did now, dressed in old military gear. The next showed them in the 1950s leaning against a classic car. Then the 1980s, at what looked like a weapons facility. Her father and Valen. Together. Throughout the decades. How Arya breathed. Dad was only 56 when he died. Those aren't your father. Look closer.
She did.
The faces were similar but different. The soldier had her grandfather's distinctive nose. The man by the car had her great uncle's chin. The one at the facility. That's my father, she whispered, recognizing the crooked smile she'd known her whole life. He looked maybe 25 in the photo, though it was dated 2003. But he was already 34 then. He looks younger, Valen finished. The blood debt works both ways, Miss Chen. When I swore to protect your father's bloodline, a portion of my life force became tied to his family. It slowed his aging, extended his vitality. His voice dropped. It should have kept him alive for another 50 years. But something went wrong. Arya pulled out more documents, classified military reports, newspaper clippings about unexplained disappearances, a map marked with red circles across the East Coast. And beneath it all, a letter in her father's handwriting, dated 3 weeks before his death.
Arya.
If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I never told you the truth. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that ignorance isn't safety. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to prepare you for this moment. The self-defense classes I made you take. The survival training disguised as camping trips. The languages I insisted you learn. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being a father. Trust the king. Do not fear him. Valen Aurelius is the closest thing to a brother I ever had, though he'd never admit it. He will keep you safe, even if it costs him everything. The watch is key. When it stops, the dead ends. But until then, you are bound to him as I was. As my father was. As his father was before him. Our family has guarded a secret for generations, Arya. And now that burden falls to you. I love you.
I'm sorry.
Dad. Arya looked up at Valen, tears streaming down her face. How long? How long has my family been tied to you? Valen's crimson eyes held infinite sadness. Since 1887, when your great-great-grandfather pulled me from a burning church. Arya did the math. That's 4 generations. 5, counting you. Valen looked away. Your family has saved my life 5 times across 138 years. And each time, the debt grows deeper. Each time, I owe more than I can ever repay, his voice cracked. Your father was trying to end it, to break the cycle. That's why he died, Miss Chen. What? The debt is killing me. And anyone bound to me, Valen's hands clenched into fists. Your father discovered the only way to free us both. But he died before he could complete the ritual. Below them, sirens wailed, police, responding to the neighbors' calls about the break-in. We need to move, Valen said, standing. And I need to show you something. The place where your father hid me 20 years ago. The place where all of this began. He extended his hand. Arya looked at the photographs, at her father's letter, at the vampire king who'd somehow been woven into her family's history for over a century. She took his hand. The cathedral ruins stood like broken teeth against the evening sky, hidden deep in the woods west of Concord. Arya had driven past this area 100 times and never noticed the crumbling stone structure lurking behind the overgrown trees. No one sees it unless we want them to, Valen explained as they approached on foot, having left areas a mile back. Your father called it selective perception, a trick of light and shadow. Magic, Arya said flatly. Survival, Valen pushed aside a tangle of dead vines, revealing an arched doorway. After the tribunal's first attempt on my life, your father brought me here. Said it was an old Puritan church, abandoned in the 1700s, forgotten by history. The perfect hiding place. They stepped inside, and Arya's breath caught. From outside, the cathedral looked like a ruin. Inside was something else entirely. The space had been transformed into a grand hall, stone walls restored and carved with intricate patterns, candlelight flickering from iron sconces, tapestries hanging between the Gothic arches. In the center, a circular table surrounded by high-backed chairs. And standing around that table, waiting, were Valen's 20 guards. They all turned as one when Valen entered, and as one, they knelt. Sire, they said in unison, heads bowed. Arya had never felt more out of place in her life. She stood in her jeans and sneakers, coffee-stained jacket, next to beings that looked like they'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Each guard was beautiful in that same unnatural way, too perfect, too still, too otherworldly. Rise, Valen commanded softly. He gestured to Arya. This is Arya Chen, daughter of Daniel, granddaughter of Marcus, great-granddaughter of William. She carries the bloodline that has protected us for 5 generations. You will treat her as you would treat me. A woman stepped forward, the same one who'd warned them at the cemetery. She had sharp features, silver blonde hair pulled back severely, and eyes the color of ice. My king, with respect. She is human. Fragile. How can we protect her when she can barely protect herself? General Cassandra, Valen's voice held a warning. You question my judgment? I question the wisdom of the blood debt itself, Cassandra's cold eyes fixed on Arya. For 138 years, your life has been tethered to mortals who die in mere decades. Each death weakens you. This one will be no different. Cassandra speaks truth, my lord, another guard said, a tall man with dark skin and tribal scars marking his cheeks. We have watched you fade with each generation. The debt is consuming you. General Marcus is correct, Valen said, and Arya heard the exhaustion beneath his words. The debt is killing me. I am aware. The chamber fell silent. Arya watched the vampires exchange glances, centuries of loyalty warring with concern on their ageless faces. Then, why continue? Arya found her voice, surprising herself. If this debt is killing you, why not just let it go? Walk away. 20 pairs of eyes turned to her, some curious, some hostile, all inhuman. Valen moved to the circular table and placed his hands on its surface. Because I swore an oath. And because your family has given me something more valuable than immortality, he looked up at his gathered court. They gave me purpose. Every time a Chun has saved my life, they saw beyond the monster. They saw someone worth saving. He gestured to the guards. Show her. General Cassandra stepped forward, drawing a curved blade from her belt. Before Arya could flinch, the vampire sliced her own palm. Dark blood welled up, not red, but deep burgundy, almost black. Blood remembers, Cassandra said, and dripped her blood onto the table's surface. The blood didn't pool or spread. Instead, it began to glow, tracing patterns across the stone table, symbols and lines that formed a map. No, not a map. A family tree.
Arya stepped closer, mesmerized.
At the roots of the tree was a name, William Chun, 1887. Branches grew upward, each generation marked. And intertwined with the Chin family tree, connecting at specific points, was another line in silver that read, Valen Aurelius. Your great-great-grandfather saved me from witch hunters, Valen explained, pointing to the first connection. I gave him a drop of my blood in gratitude, standard practice to seal a debt. But your ancestor had a rare gift. His body accepted vampire essence without transforming. Instead, it adapted. What does that mean?
Arya whispered.
It means your bloodline carries trace amounts of vampire essence, General Marcus said. Not enough to make you one of us, but enough to extend your life, enhance your healing, sharpen your senses, and enough to bind your life force to our kings. Cassandra's blood map pulsed, and Arya saw new lines appearing, each showing a Chen family member connected to Valen across the decades. With each generation, the bond deepened. Your grandfather's blood saved the king from silver poisoning. Your uncle's blood healed him after a tribunal ambush. And your father. Your father gave me his blood to cure a curse, Valen finished, his voice heavy. 20 years ago, a rival vampire infected me with a rot, a supernatural disease that slowly destroys us from within. Human blood is usually fatal to consume, but your father's blood, already carrying my essence. It worked. It saved me. But it bonded you even deeper. Arya realized, horror dawning. And now you're what? Connected to me? Valen met her eyes. Your heartbeat echoes in my mind every moment. When you're afraid, I feel it. When you're hurt, I bleed. We are linked, Arya Chin, whether either of us wants it or not. A younger vampire, he looked barely 20, with a mess of red curls, spoke up nervously. Sire, there's something else she needs to know. About the end point. Kieran, Valen warned. She deserves the truth. Kieran insisted. The debt isn't just fading you. It's reaching critical mass. In older texts, blood debts that span this long, they always end the same way.
How? Arya demanded.
The chamber fell deathly silent. Finally, General Marcus spoke, his deep voice filling the space. In mutual destruction. When the debt reaches its end point, both the Oathgiver and the bloodline heir perish. Your life force and his will consume each other, leaving nothing. Arya felt the floor tilt beneath her.
When?
When does this happen? Valen turned away, staring at the cathedral's stained glass windows. The signs have already begun. My power fades by the day. Your father's watch, it's counting down. When it stops, he didn't finish. How long? Arya's voice was barely a whisper. Based on current deterioration, Cassandra said clinically, 3 weeks. Perhaps 4-inch. So I have a month to live, Arya laughed, a brittle sound. Because my great-great-grandfather was a good Samaritan. There may be another way, Kieran said quickly. The ancient texts mention a ritual. The ritual requires a sacrifice. Valen cut him off sharply. It's not an option. What's sacrifice?
Arya demanded.
No one answered. The vampires looked at each other, then at their king, centuries of secrets passing between them in glances. Tell me, Arya said, and was surprised by the steel in her own voice. If I'm going to die anyway, I deserve to know everything. Valen finally turned to face her, and she saw something in his crimson eyes she hadn't expected. Shame. The only way to break a blood debt of this magnitude, he said quietly, is for the last living heir to willingly give their life force to the Oathgiver. Complete transfusion. Your blood, your essence, your very soul absorbed into mine, his hands clenched. It would save me, restore my full power, and it would kill you instantly. And if I refuse, we both die when the debt reaches its end point. Arya looked around at the 20 vampires, ancient beings who had knelt before her moments ago, who had protected generations of her family. She thought of her father's letter, of 4 generations of Chens giving their blood to save a vampire king. So my choices are, die in a month naturally, or die now to save you. She laughed again, harsher this time. Some protection. There is a third option, a cold voice said from the cathedral's entrance. Everyone spun. Standing in the doorway was a vampire Arya hadn't seen before, tall and sharp-featured, with hair like spun gold and eyes that burned with amber fire. Unlike Valen's guards, who wore modern clothing beneath their coats, this one dressed in pure black armor that looked medieval. Lord Varek, Valen said, his voice dropping to a growl. You were not invited to this gathering. No, Varek smiled, showing fangs. But I came anyway. And I bring a message from the Western courts, his eyes fixed on Arya. Kill the girl now, before the debt completes. Your death would be inconvenient for our kind, my lord. But if she dies first, the debt voids and you survive. 20 vampires drew weapons in perfect synchronization, the sound of steel ringing through the chamber. Varek didn't flinch. Think carefully, Valen. 1 human life. Or the king of the Eastern courts. Which matters more? Valen moved faster than Arya's eyes could track, crossing the chamber in a blur and slamming Varek against the stone wall. The impact cracked the ancient stones, dust raining down around them. You dare, Valen hissed, his hand around Varek's throat, come into my sanctuary and threaten a blood heir under my protection. Varek just smiled, unfazed by the hand crushing his windpipe. I'm not threatening her, my king. I'm offering you survival. Something your sentimentality seems to have blinded you to. Stand down, Varek. Valen's voice was deadly quiet. This is your only warning. Or what? You'll kill me? Varek laughed, a harsh sound. You can barely stand upright. I can smell the decay in you, Valen. The rot you think you cured, it's back, mutating. The human blood that saved you 20 years ago is now poison in your veins. Arya saw it then, the slight tremor in Valen's hand, the way he shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. He was weaker than he appeared. The Western courts have made their position clear, Varek continued. End this farce of a blood debt, or we will end it for you. The girl dies, you live, and the Eastern and Western courts can finally unite, as we should have centuries ago. United under Western rule, you mean, General Cassandra spat. With Varek as puppet king. Varek's amber eyes flicked to her. Careful, General. Your loyalty to a dying king may be admirable, but it's also foolish. He looked back at Valen. I'm not your enemy. I'm offering you a way out. Let me take the girl. Quick and painless. You'll be free. No. Valen's grip tightened, and Varek actually winced. The Chun family has protected me for 5 generations. I will not repay that debt with murder. Then you'll die for pride. Varek's smile faded. And when you do, the Eastern courts will fall. Is 1 human worth the destruction of everything you've built? Valen released him, stepping back. Get out. Think about it, Varek said, straightening his armor. You have 3 weeks. Maybe less. His eyes found Arya across the chamber. I'll be waiting, Miss Chen. When your king finally realizes the truth, I'll make it quick. That's more mercy than most humans receive. He vanished, not walked away, but simply ceased to be there, leaving only a swirl of disturbed dust. The chamber erupted in angry voices, vampires arguing over what Varek's appearance meant, whether the Western courts would actually attack, how to protect their king. Arya heard it all as if from underwater, her mind reeling.
She was going to die.
Either in 3 weeks when the debt consumed them both, or sooner if someone decided she wasn't worth the trouble. Enough! Valen's voice cut through the chaos. The vampires fell silent. Arya needs rest. Cassandra, prepare the lower chambers. Marcus, double the perimeter guard. Kieran, he paused, swaying slightly. Sire? Kieran rushed forward as Valen's knees buckled. Arya moved without thinking, catching Valen's arm. The moment she touched him, pain lanced through her chest, sharp and burning, like her heart was being squeezed in a vice. She gasped, and Valen's eyes widened. Don't, he started, but it was too late. The world exploded into sensation. Arya felt everything Valen felt, the slow decay eating at him from inside, the constant drain of the blood debt pulling at his essence, the weight of 300 years of memories and regrets. And beneath it all, a desperate, aching need to protect her, so strong it bordered on madness. Then it was gone, and she was on her knees, gasping. The bond, General Marcus said grimly. It's accelerating. Valen pulled away from her, his face ashen even for a vampire.
I'm sorry.
I should have warned you not to touch me. Physical contact strengthens the link. What was that? Arya's hands shook. I felt everything. And I felt you. Valen looked shaken. Your fear, your anger, your determination to survive. He turned to his generals. We're running out of time. The ritual, we need to attempt it.
No.
Kieran protested. Sire, the ritual requires. I know what it requires, Valen's jaw set. But there may be a way to modify it, to transfer enough essence to stabilize me without killing her. Cassandra shook her head. The texts are clear. Partial transference has never succeeded. It's all or nothing. Then we make it succeed. Valen moved toward a stone archway at the back of the cathedral. Arya, come with me. The rest of you, prepare the sanctuary below. We begin at midnight. Arya followed Valen down a spiral staircase carved into the rock beneath the cathedral. The air grew colder with each step, and strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, protection wards, she somehow knew, though she had no idea how. They emerged into a vast underground chamber. In its center was a raised platform covered in intricate carvings, and on that platform, a circle made of what looked like silver and salt. This is where your father performed the ritual 20 years ago, Valen said quietly. Where he gave me his blood and bound us deeper than any chin before him. Arya approached the circle, seeing dark stains on the stone. How much blood did he give you? Nearly all of it. Valen's voice was heavy with old guilt. He would have died if I hadn't used my own essence to heal him. That's when we discovered the truth. Our blood had merged. His carried my essence, mine carried his humanity. We were no longer separate beings, but two parts of a whole. And now I'm part of that whole. Yes, Valen moved to the circle's edge, kneeling. Arya, I need you to understand something. This ritual, if we attempt it, there's a strong chance it will kill you. But if we don't attempt it, you die anyway. And so do I. What are the odds? Arya asked. If we try the modified version? Valen was quiet for a long moment. 10%. Maybe less. And if we do the full ritual? The sacrifice. 100% success. I live.
UD.
Arya looked at the blood-stained platform, thinking of her father kneeling here 20 years ago, bleeding himself nearly to death for a vampire he'd known for only 3 days. What had he been thinking? Had he been afraid? Or had he seen something in Valen worth dying for? Show me, she said finally. Show me how the ritual works. Valen rose and stepped into the circle. Immediately, the carvings began to glow, silver light spreading across the stone like liquid metal. He drew a blade from his coat, ancient-looking, with a handle wrapped in red leather. The ritual requires blood given freely, he explained, rolling up his sleeve. The heir and the oath-giver, bleeding together within the circle. The sigils channel the essence, allowing it to transfer. He drew the blade across his palm. Dark blood welled up, and where it dripped onto the circle, the silver light turned crimson. In the full ritual, I would drain you completely, Valen continued, his voice clinical now, as if discussing anything other than her death. Your blood, your life force, your very soul, all absorbed into me. The debt would be fulfilled, the bond broken, and I would be restored to full strength. And, in the modified version, I take only what's needed to stabilize me, enough to slow the decay, buy us time to find another solution. But the bond remains, and we have to repeat the ritual every few weeks until he trailed off. Until I run out of blood to give, Arya finished. Death by installments instead of all at once. There has to be another way, Valen's hand clenched around the blade. Your father was researching something before he died. He believed he'd found a method to break the bond without sacrifice, but he never told me the details. He said it was too dangerous, that I'd never allow it. Where's his research? That's what I don't know. He kept his final notes hidden, said he'd reveal them when the time was right. Valen looked up at her. But he died before he could. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. General Marcus descended, his expression grave. My king, we have a problem. Varric didn't leave the area. He's gathering forces in the woods, and he hesitated. We intercepted a message to the western courts. He's calling for a full assault. When? Valen demanded.
Dawn.
He plans to breach the cathedral and take Miss Chan by force. Arya felt ice flood her veins. How many? At least 50 vampires. Maybe more, Marcus looked between them. We're outnumbered 2-1, sire. If you were at full strength, the odds wouldn't matter. But as you are now. He didn't need to finish. They all knew what he meant. Valen was dying, and come dawn, Varric would have an easy victory. Unless they performed the ritual first. Valen turned to Arya, and she saw the anguish in his crimson eyes. I won't force you, but if we don't act tonight, we do the modified ritual, Arya said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. We buy time, find my father's research, and hope there's a real solution in there.
Arya.
My father gave his blood for you. I can do the same. She stepped toward the circle, then paused. But Valen, when we find another way, and we will find another way, you're going to tell me everything. Every detail about this bond, about my family's history, about why you've protected us for 138 years. No more secrets. A ghost of a smile crossed Valen's face. No more secrets. He extended his hand across the glowing circle. Arya took it, and the ritual began. Arya woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and her entire body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached. Her head pounded, and when she lifted her hand to shield her eyes from the light, she saw the bandage wrapped around her palm, white gauze spotted with dried blood. The ritual, the circle, the feeling of her blood leaving her body while crimson light pulsed around them, Valen's essence pouring into her even as hers flowed into him. She'd passed out halfway through, the pain too intense to endure conscious. You're awake, Kieran appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray. Good.
You need to eat.
And drink this. It's water mixed with iron supplements, and he paused. Some of the king's blood. It'll help you recover faster. Arya pushed herself upright, ignoring the way the room spun. Where's Valen? Dealing with Varric's forces. They attacked at dawn as promised, but Kieran grinned, setting the tray on her lap. Let's just say the ritual worked better than we hoped. The king tore through them like he did in the old days. Varric retreated with what was left of his vampires about an hour ago. Relief flooded through her. So, we have more time. Maybe. Varric won't give up that easily, Kieran's smile faded. But there's another problem. While you were unconscious, humans showed up. What humans? The kind with badges and weapons that make my skin itch. Kieran moved to the window, peering out carefully. They've set up a perimeter about half a mile out. Not moving in yet, just watching. Arya threw off the covers, ignoring Kieran's protests. She stumbled to the window and looked out over the forest. Sure enough, she could see them. Black SUVs parked in a cleared area, figures in tactical gear moving between the vehicles. Who are they? She asked. According to Marcus's reconnaissance, their government. Some kind of special operations unit. Kieran's young face, looked worried. They're equipped with UV weapons, silver ammunition, and something else. Canisters that Marcus says smell like concentrated sunlight. That's not possible. Tell that to them. Kieran handed her the glass of red-tinged water.
Drink.
You lost a lot of blood. Arya sipped it, trying not to think about what she was consuming. The liquid tasted metallic but not unpleasant, and warmth immediately spread through her chest. How do they even know we're here? That's what the king wants to know. Footsteps on the stairs announced more arrivals. Valen entered, followed by Generals Cassandra and Marcus. The vampire king looked transformed from the night before. His skin had more color, his movements were stronger, his presence more commanding. But his eyes still held that deep exhaustion, like someone carrying a weight too heavy to ever fully put down. Arya, he nodded to her. How do you feel? Like I donated a few pints to a very persuasive vampire. She stood, wobbling slightly. Kieran says we have company. The worst kind. Valen moved to a desk in the corner, spreading out what looked like surveillance photos. Project Eclipse. Your father mentioned them in his notes. A Black Ops program started in the 1990s, designed to weaponize supernatural elements. They were shut down after the Boston incident in 2004. What incident? Arya moved closer, looking at the photos. They showed vampires in cages, experimental weapons, documents marked with heavy redaction. 12 vampires captured and experimented on, Marcus said grimly. The project director wanted to synthesize vampire essence into a serum that could enhance human soldiers. The vampires died in captivity. Messily. Your father was part of the team that exposed them, Valen added. He leaked the documentation to the press, got the program shut down, made a lot of powerful enemies in the process. He never told me any of this, Arya whispered, staring at a photo of her father, younger, in military fatigues, standing outside what looked like a bunker facility. He was protecting you. Valen's finger tapped another photo. This is Colonel Richard Hayes, the director of Project Eclipse. Your father's testimony put him in front of a military tribunal. He was dishonorably discharged. The man in the photo had a hard face and colder eyes. Even in a still image, he looked dangerous. Hayes has been trying to restart the program for years, Cassandra said. We've intercepted rumors, blocked his funding, eliminated his supporters. But if he's here now, he's found new backing, Valen finished. And he wants revenge on the Chin family. His crimson eyes met Arya's. You're not just caught between vampire courts. You're caught between supernatural and human politics. They must have been monitoring your father's house, Marcus added. Saw the attack yesterday and followed us here. A sharp whistle cut through the conversation, a warning signal. Another vampire appeared at the door, breathing hard. My king, the humans are moving. 20 soldiers, advancing on the cathedral. They won't breach the wards, Cassandra said confidently. They don't need to, Valen's jaw tightened. They just need to keep us pinned here while Varric regroups, he turned to Arya. This is why your father wanted to end the blood debt. He knew that being tied to me made you a target from both sides. So what do we do? Arya asked. Before Valen could answer, an explosion rocked the cathedral. Stone dust rained from the ceiling, and the ancient building groaned. Through the window, Arya saw smoke rising from the eastern wall. They breached the wards, Marcus said, shocked. That's impossible. Another explosion, closer. The window shattered, and Kieran pulled Arya away from the glass. They have someone who knows vampire magic, Valen realized. Someone who understands our defenses. A voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. Valen Aurelius, King of the Eastern Courts. This is Colonel Richard Hayes, United States Special Operations. You are harboring a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. Release Arya Chen, and we'll withdraw peacefully. Liar, Cassandra hissed. The moment they have her, they'll use her to draw you out. I know. Valen moved toward the door. Which is why we're not giving them the chance. Cassandra, Marcus, evacuate everyone to the northern tunnels. Kieran, stay with Arya. What are you going to do? Arya grabbed his arm. Talk to them. Valen gently removed her hand. I've spent 300 years avoiding human attention. Your father understood that exposure would mean war. But if Hayes wants me that badly, better he focuses on me than you. They'll try to capture you, Marcus warned. Let them try. Valen's smile showed fangs. The ritual gave me back enough strength to remind these humans why their ancestors feared the night. He started for the stairs, but Aria's voice stopped him. My father's research. Where would he have hidden it? Valen paused. He had a safety deposit box. Bank of Boston, downtown branch. But I don't know the box number or how to access it. I do. Aria pulled her father's keyring from her pocket. She'd grabbed it from his house yesterday before the attack. Among the keys was a small brass one, different from the others, with a number engraved on it, 847. He gave me this keyring the day before he died. Said I should keep it safe, that I'd know when I needed it. Valen stared at the key. He was preparing you even then. We need to get to that box, Aria said. Whatever's inside, it might be our only chance. Another explosion shook the cathedral. Voices shouted outside, and Aria heard the distinctive sound of boots on stone, soldiers entering the building. Go, Valen ordered. Cassandra, get her to the city. Marcus, you're with me. Sire. Cassandra started to protest. That's an order, General. Aria's life is worth more than this cathedral, Valen's eyes blazed. And if Hayes wants a war, I'll give him one he'll never forget. He descended the stairs like an avenging angel, Marcus following. Moments later, Aria heard screams, human screams, full of terror. We need to move now, Cassandra said, pulling Aria toward a hidden door in the back wall. The tunnels will take us 3 miles north. We'll have cars waiting. What about Valen? Aria asked, even as Cassandra dragged her into the darkness of the escape route. The king can handle himself. You, however, are mortal and vulnerable. Cassandra's ice-blue eyes gleamed in the dark. And whether I like it or not, you're the key to saving him. They ran through tunnels that smelled of earth and age, Kieran and 3 other vampires flanking them. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded. Gunfire, screams, the crash of falling stone. When they finally emerged into daylight, hidden by trees 2 miles from the cathedral, Aria turned back. She could see smoke rising above the forest, hear distant explosions. He'll be okay, Kieran said quietly, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. He's survived worse. But Aria felt it through the bond, pain, rage, and underneath it all, grim determination. Valen was fighting for his life, and she was running away to a bank to find research that might not even help. She touched the bandage on her palm, feeling her blood pulse beneath it. Blood that now carried Valen's essence, just as it carried hers. Let's go, she said, climbing into the waiting car. My father died protecting whatever's in that safety deposit box. Time to find out if it was worth it. As they drove away, Aria took one last look at the smoke rising over the trees and silently promised, I'm coming back for you. Just hold on. The Bank of Boston's downtown branch looked absurdly normal, marble floors, security guards with bored expressions, customers waiting in line for tellers. Aria felt like she'd stepped from one world into another, from vampire kings and underground cathedrals back into mundane reality. Except reality was now hunting her from both sides. Stay close, Cassandra murmured, her hand resting casually on Aria's elbow. To anyone watching, they looked like friends running errands. No one could see the blade hidden in Cassandra's sleeve or the 3 other vampires positioned around the bank's perimeter. Aria approached the safety deposit desk, key clutched in her sweating palm. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, smiled pleasantly. Can I help you? I need to access box 847. Aria's voice sounded steadier than she felt. It was my father's. Daniel Chun. The woman's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. I'll need to see identification and verify your access rights. Aria provided her driver's license and the death certificate she'd been carrying since the funeral. The clerk typed slowly, checking records, and with each passing second, Aria felt more exposed. Hayes's people could be anywhere. Watching. Waiting. Everything appears to be in order, the clerk finally said. Follow me, please. They descended into the vault, a sterile room lined with metal boxes. The clerk used her master key in combination with Aria's key, pulling out a long metal drawer. Take your time. Press the button when you're finished. Once alone, Aria opened the drawer with trembling hands. Inside was a leather journal, a USB drive, and a photograph she'd never seen before, her father and Valen, sitting on the hood of a car, both laughing. Her father's arm was thrown around Valen's shoulders, like they were brothers. The journal's first page had a single line in her father's handwriting. If you're reading this, trust no one. Not even him. Aria's blood ran cold. Trust no one? Not even did he mean Valen. She flipped through pages of research notes, diagrams of the blood debt structure, chemical formulas she didn't understand. And then, halfway through, a section titled, The Truth About Blood Debts. Her father's writing grew more frantic here, words underlined multiple times. Blood debts don't naturally end in mutual destruction. That's vampire propaganda, designed to force early sacrifice. She kept reading. I've found records of ancient blood debts lasting centuries, without decay. The difference? Those vampires never formed emotional attachments to their human debtors. They maintained clinical distance. But Valen, he's gotten too close. To my father. Force him to want to break the oath. It goes against everything I believe, but to save Aria, I have to destroy the friendship I've spent 20 years building. Tomorrow, I meet with Varek. I'm going to give him information that will turn the vampire courts against Valen. Make him seem weak. Corruptible. He thought the blood debt was an unavoidable curse, thought he was protecting her out of honor, when really... Footsteps echoed outside the vault room. Too many footsteps. Aria grabbed the journal and USB drive, shoving them into her jacket. She pressed the button for the clerk, trying to keep her breathing steady. But the door opened to reveal not the clerk, but Cassandra, and behind her, 5 vampires in black armor. Not Valen's guards. These wore the insignia of the Western courts. I'm sorry, Cassandra said, and actually sounded like she meant it. But the general was right. One human life isn't worth our king's destruction. Aria backed away. You're working with Varek? I'm saving Valen from himself. Cassandra stepped into the vault. He spent 138 years sacrificing his power, his position, his very life for a family of humans. It ends now. Varek has promised me that if I deliver you, he'll spare the Eastern courts. Everyone survives. Everyone except you. The ritual was a temporary fix. You know it, and I know it. In 3 weeks, you'll both be dead anyway. Cassandra's ice-blue eyes were hard. This way, only one person dies. It's simple mathematics. Valen will never forgive you, Aria said, still backing toward the wall of safety deposit boxes.
He will.
Eventually. When he's alive and strong again. When the Eastern courts are secure. When he's had centuries to forget one stubborn human girl. Cassandra drew her blade. I've served him for 200 years. I know what he needs better than he does. The Western court vampires fanned out, blocking the exit. Aria's mind raced. She couldn't fight.
Couldn't run.
But maybe. Cassandra. Kieran's voice echoed from somewhere above. Cassandra, where are you? The king is. His words cut off in a gurgle. Something heavy hit the floor. Kieran was loyal to the end, one of the Western vampires said. Shame. Rage flooded through Aria, hot and fierce and completely unlike anything she'd felt before. Kieran, who'd brought her breakfast and tried to make her smile.
Dead.
Because Cassandra had decided Aria's life was expendable. The rage must have shown on her face because Cassandra actually took a step back. Don't make this harder then. Aria's hand found the pocket watch in her jacket, the one that had started ticking after her father's death. She pulled it out, and the moment her skin touched the metal, she felt it. Valen's essence, burning inside her from the ritual, responding to her fury. The watch began to glow. That's impossible, Cassandra breathed. You're human. Arya threw the watch. It sailed through the air and shattered against the wall. And where it broke, crimson light exploded outward, not destroying, but calling. The bond, Arya realized. The blood bond between her and Valen. She was pulling on it like a lifeline, screaming through the connection. Help me. Clever, Cassandra admitted. But he's too far away. By the time he arrives, you'll be. The vault's wall exploded inward. Not the door. Not a window. The solid marble wall simply shattered, and through the dust and debris strode Valen, his eyes blazing like hellfire. He was covered in blood, some of it his own, most of it not. His coat was torn, his skin showed burns from UV weapons, and he moved with the barely contained violence of a predator whose territory had been invaded. Cassandra, he said quietly, and his voice was more terrifying for its softness. Step away from her. My king, Cassandra started.
Now.
The word resonated through the vault like thunder. The Western Court vampires actually cowered, and even Cassandra took 3 quick steps backward. Valen crossed the space to Arya in 2 strides, his hands gentle despite his fury as he checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, but Kieran is healing upstairs. Stabbed, not dead. Valen's eyes never left Cassandra, though the same cannot be said for the vampires who attacked him. Sire, please understand, Cassandra said, her composure cracking. I'm trying to save you. By murdering the daughter of the man who gave me life? Valen's voice could have frozen oceans. By betraying every oath you've ever sworn to me? The debt is killing you. I've watched you fade for decades, sacrificing yourself for humans who die in a blink. Cassandra's eyes shone with unshed tears, the first emotion Arya had seen from her. I can't watch you die. Not for this. That, Valen said softly, was never your choice to make. He raised his hand, and the Western Court vampires turned to ash where they stood, not dramatically, not with screams, but simply ceasing to exist. Ancient power, barely controlled. Cassandra dropped to her knees. Sire, you were my general, my friend, someone I trusted with my life. Valen's voice broke slightly. And you would have killed her. Killed someone under my protection, bearing my essence, bound to my very soul. To save you, Cassandra whispered. I never asked to be saved. Valen looked at her for a long moment, and Arya saw genuine grief in his crimson eyes. You're banished, Cassandra. Leave the Eastern Courts and never return. If I see you again, old friendship won't stay my hand. Cassandra stood slowly, her face pale even for a vampire. She looked at Arya, and something almost like apology flickered in her ice-blue eyes. Then she was gone, moving faster than sight. Alone in the destroyed vault, Valen finally allowed himself to sag. Arya caught his arm, and through the bond, felt the pain radiating through him, physical and emotional. Hayes, she asked. Retreated. For now, Valen's hand covered hers on his arm. They lost 15 soldiers. The colonel won't be eager to engage again without better intelligence. Valen, my father's research. Arya pulled out the journal. You need to read this. But before she could explain, Marcus appeared in the shattered wall opening, breathing hard. Sire, we have a problem. Varric isn't regrouping. He's heading to the place where this all began. Valen went very still. The warehouse.
Yes.
And he's bringing everyone. He's calling it a formal challenge for leadership of both courts. Marcus's expression was grim. If you don't show, you forfeit. The Eastern courts fall to Western rule. And if I do show, single combat, to the death. Victor takes all. Marcus looked between them. He knows you're weakened. He's counting on it. Valen stood straight, forcing strength into his frame. Then we don't disappoint him. Gather everyone loyal to me. We end this tonight. Wait, Arya said, clutching the journal. You don't understand. The blood debt, it's not what you think. My father found. Later, Valen's hand cupped her face gently. Right now, I need to ensure you survive long enough to tell me. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it broke Arya's heart, and then he was gone, moving with Marcus back toward whatever final battle awaited. Arya stood alone in the destroyed vault, holding her father's last words, knowing the truth, but unable to speak it to the one person who needed to hear it most. The more a vampire cares about their debtor, the more the debt consumes them. And Valen, she realized with dawning horror, cared far too much. The warehouse stood exactly as it had 20 years ago, according to Valen, a hulking skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows in Boston's abandoned industrial district. This was where Daniel Chun had saved a vampire king's life, where everything had begun. Now it would be where everything ended. Arya crouched behind a shipping container 200 yards away, watching vampires gather in the open space before the warehouse. Dozens of them, maybe 100, split into clear factions. On the left, Valen's loyalists, his remaining guards, Eastern Court vampires who still believed in him. On the right, Varric's forces, larger, better armed, confident. "You shouldn't be here," Marcus said beside her. He'd tried to make her stay at a safe house, but she'd simply followed anyway. "If things go badly, I need to talk to Valen." Before this starts, Arya clutched her father's journal. "Marcus, the blood debt, it's not what any of you think. My father discovered." "Miss Chun," Marcus's dark eyes were kind but firm. "Whatever your father discovered, it won't matter if our king dies tonight. Varric will challenge him to single combat. Ancient law. No one can interfere once it begins. Can Valen win?" Marcus was quiet for too long. At full strength? Without question. As he is now, weakened by the debt, wounded from Hayes's attack, he shook his head. Varric is counting on him being too honorable to back down and too weak to win. Below, Valen emerged from the warehouse's main entrance. Even from this distance, Arya could see he'd cleaned up, new coat, hair tied back, every inch the king he was supposed to be. But she felt his exhaustion through the bond, felt the pain he was hiding beneath his regal bearing. Varric stepped forward to meet him, and the crowd of vampires fell silent. "Valen Aurelius," Varric's voice carried across the space. "I challenge you for leadership of the Eastern and Western courts. Single combat, according to the old laws. Do you accept?" "I accept," Valen said simply. "On one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions." Nevertheless, Valen's eyes swept the gathered vampires. "When I win, all those who sided with you receive amnesty.
No executions. No banishments.
We unify as one court, not as conquerors and conquered." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even some of Varric's supporters looked surprised. "And when I win?" Varric asked. "The Eastern courts are yours. Do with them what you will." Valen's voice dropped. "But you leave Arya Chun alone. The blood debt voids with my death. She becomes just another human, beneath your notice."
No.
Arya started forward, but Marcus grabbed her arm.
"Don't," he hissed.
"You'll only distract him." "Agreed," Varric said, smiling. "Though I find it touching that your last thoughts are of your pet human." He drew a long blade, silver. Arya realized with horror. "Shall we begin?" Valen drew his own blade. "One more thing, Varric. After you lose tonight, after your ambition has cost you everything, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you chose pride over peace. Chose power over loyalty. Save the speech for your eulogy," Varric attacked. The battle was too fast for Arya's human eyes to fully follow. Blades clashed in blurs of silver, the two vampires moving faster than thought. Valen was skilled, 300 years of experience in every parry and strike, but Arya felt his weakness through the bond. Each movement cost him. Each blow he blocked sent pain radiating through their connection. Varric was relentless, pressing his advantage, driving Valen backward toward the warehouse wall. "I have to stop this," Arya said desperately. "Marcus, there has to be a way." "There isn't. The old laws are absolute." Marcus's jaw clenched. "All we can do is watch." Steel rang against steel. Valen ducked under a strike that would have taken his head off, rolled, came up slashing. His blade caught Varek's shoulder, drawing dark blood. But Varek's counterstrike was faster, and his silver blade carved a line across Valen's chest. Valen staggered, and Arya felt his pain like it was her own, burning, agonizing, the silver poisoning spreading through him. "Get up," she whispered. "Please get up." Valen rose, slower this time. Blood soaked through his shirt, too much blood. Through the bond, Arya felt his life force flickering. "You're dying," Varek said, circling like a shark. "The human blood in your veins is reacting to the silver. Ironic, isn't it? The very thing that saved you is now killing you." "Then finish it," Valen said quietly. "No." Arya broke free from Marcus's grip and ran down the hill before he could stop her. "No, you don't get to give up." She burst through the circle of vampires, 100 pairs of inhuman eyes turning toward her, and stumbled to a stop between Valen and Varek. "Arya, get back," Valen started. "Shut up," she spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Just shut up and listen to me. The blood debt, it's not killing you. You're killing yourself." She thrust her father's journal at him. "My father figured it out. The decay, the end point, all of it, it's not inevitable. It's guilt. You're punishing yourself for being saved, for surviving when others died, for caring about the humans who protected you. The more you care, the more it consumes you." Valen stared at the journal, then at her. "That's not." "It is. Blood debts can last forever if the vampire wants them to. But you don't want to live with this burden anymore. You never have." Arya's voice broke. "My father died trying to make you hate him, trying to give you a reason to break the oath. Because he knew you'd never choose your own life over honoring the debt." The gathered vampires were deathly silent, all watching this human girl confronting their king. "Your father," Valen's hand trembled as he took the journal. "He betrayed me to save you." "He loved you," Arya said, "like a brother. And he knew that meant you'd die for me the same way you'd have died for him. So he made himself the villain. Made you think he turned on you." She touched the wound on his chest, her hand coming away bloody. "Read his last entry. The truth about what he told Varek." Valen opened the journal with shaking hands, his crimson eyes scanning the final page. As he read, his expression shattered, grief and understanding and terrible, aching regret all washing over his features. "He told Varek that I was going insane," Valen whispered. "That the blood debt had corrupted me, made me betray vampire interests for human sentiment. He destroyed my reputation, turned the Western courts against me. All to," his voice broke, "all to make me angry enough to sever the bond and save you. But you never did," Arya said softly. "Even thinking he betrayed you, you couldn't break the oath. Because that's who you are, Valen. You keep your promises, even when they destroy you." Valen looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, Arya saw him without the weight of 300 years of guilt and duty. Just a person, exhausted and hurting and desperately trying to do the right thing. "I'm so tired," he admitted. "I've been tired for so long." "I know," Arya took his hand, their blood mingling where they touched. "But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. That's what my father was trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Choose to live, Valen. Not for honor or duty or debt. Just choose to live." "Touching," Varek interrupted coldly. "But irrelevant. The challenge stands. Unless," he smiled cruelly, "the great Valen Aurelius wishes to forfeit? To save his strength for his precious human." Valen looked at Varek, then at the gathered vampires, then back at Arya. She saw him making a choice, not between life and death, but between the king he'd been and the person he could be. "I forfeit," he said clearly. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Even Varek looked shocked. "What?" "I forfeit the challenge. I forfeit leadership of the Eastern courts." Valen's voice grew stronger. "I've spent 3 centuries ruling, fighting, making choices that saved our kind but cost me everything that makes existence worth living. No more." He turned to his gathered loyalists. "Marcus, you have my blessing to lead. General Kieran, support him. The rest of you, follow Varric if you want power, follow Marcus if you want peace. I'm done. You can't just walk away, Varric snarled. The courts will survive without me. They always do. Valen pulled Arya against his side, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I choose her. I choose life. And I choose to finally, after 300 years, be free. Silence. Then slowly Marcus knelt. Then Kieran. Then one by one, every vampire in Valen's guard dropped to one knee. We follow you still, my king, Marcus said quietly. Wherever that leads. Even some of Varric's supporters looked uncertain now, glancing between their would-be leader and the king who'd just given up everything. Varric's face twisted with rage. Then you die anyway. If you won't fight for the crown, fight for your life. He lunged, silver blade aimed at Valen's heart. But Arya was faster. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved, throwing herself forward, her hand catching Varric's wrist. The moment she touched him, crimson light exploded from her palm. Valen's essence, living in her blood. Her father's essence, passed down through generations. And her own will, fierce and absolute. No one else dies tonight. The light consumed Varric's blade, turning the silver to ash. It raced up his arm, and he screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the combined essence of 5 generations of Chens burned through him. That's for my father, Arya said through gritted teeth. And for every person you've hurt to feed your ambition. Varric crumpled, his body unable to withstand the force of a bloodline that had been protecting vampires since 1887. He didn't turn to ash, didn't die dramatically. He simply collapsed, powerless and broken. Arya stood over him, her hand still glowing. She felt Valen behind her, steady and solid. It's over, Valen said softly, to her, to Varric, to all the gathered vampires. It's finally over. Varric's collapse should have ended it. Should have sent his followers scattering. Should have brought peace. Instead, it started a war. Traitor. One of Varric's generals, a vampire with scars crossing his face like a map of violence, drew twin blades. The human wields vampire essence. She's an abomination. An aberration, another shouted. Unnatural. The Western Court vampires erupted into chaos, half moving to retreat, half drawing weapons, all of them terrified of what Arya had just done. Because she was right, it shouldn't have been possible. Humans didn't channel vampire essence. Humans didn't burn through ancient vampires with a touch. Stand down, Marcus roared, positioning himself between Arya and the advancing Western Court. Valen's loyalists formed a protective circle, weapons drawn. But they were still outnumbered, and Arya could feel Valen weakening behind her, his wound from the silver blades spreading poison through his system. We need to get him out of here, Kieran said urgently. That silver is killing him. No one leaves. The scarred general pointed his blade at Valen. You've corrupted a human bloodline with your essence. Created a weapon. The Crimson Hall must judge this. The Crimson Hall? Valen's laugh was bitter. You want to involve the vampire capital in this? Very well. Let's see what the old council thinks of your failed coup. He swayed, and Arya caught him. Through their bond, she felt his heart. Yes, vampires had hearts. They just beat slower, struggling against the silver poison. Valen, you can't. I can. His crimson eyes met hers. One more performance. Then I rest. I promise. He straightened, pulling strength from somewhere deep inside, and his voice rang out across the warehouse yard. Any vampire here may petition the Crimson Hall for judgment. Is that what you want? To drag our internal disputes before the old council? To admit that the Eastern and Western courts are so weak they couldn't handle one human girl? Murmurs rippled through both factions. The Crimson Hall was legend, the seat of vampire government, hidden somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, ruled by vampires so old they'd walked the earth when Rome was young. No one involved the Crimson Hall unless absolutely necessary, because their judgments were final and often brutal. The human is dangerous, the scarred general insisted, but his voice had lost some certainty. The human is protected. Valen's shout echoed off the warehouse walls. By blood, oath older than most of you. By 5 generations of sacrifice. By ancient law that even the Crimson Hall would uphold. You want to challenge that? Go ahead. Petition the council. But know this. He stepped forward, and despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion, he looked every inch a king. If you force the Crimson Hall to judgment, they will investigate everything.
Vareke s'attempted-ku.
The Western Court's alliance with human military forces. The decades of undermining Eastern Court authority. Every secret you've buried, every law you've bent, all of it will come to light. The vampires shifted uneasily. Even Arya, who barely understood vampire politics, could sense the threat in Valen's words. He wasn't just protecting her, he was threatening to expose everyone. Or, Valen continued, his voice softening, we end this now. Varek is defeated. His challenge failed. The courts remain separate, but at peace. And Arya Chin returns to her human life, bothering no one inch. She has vampire essence, someone argued. She's a liability. She's a data analyst from Boston. Kieran interjected. What's she going to do? Weaponize spreadsheets. Despite the tension, a few vampires actually laughed. But the scarred general wasn't satisfied. The law is clear. Humans who learn of our existence must be dealt with. Either turned bound or killed. Arya found her voice. That's your solution? Kill everyone who discovers you exist. It's survived us for millennia, the general said coldly. No, Arya pulled away from Valen, standing on her own despite her trembling legs. What survived you is fear. Secrecy. Always hiding, always running. My family spent 5 generations protecting your king, and what has it gotten any of us? My father died alone, keeping your secrets. My great-great-grandfather spent his life looking over his shoulder. All of you, she gestured at the gathered vampires, living in shadows, pretending the modern world doesn't exist. What would you have us do? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Announce ourselves? That worked so well in Salem. I'd have you stop treating humans like threats or resources. Arya's voice strengthened. Start treating us like what we are, people sharing a world with you. My father proved it was possible. 20 years of friendship with a vampire king. No one died. No secrets were exposed. Just coexistence. Pretty speech, the scarred general said. But naive.
Your father's dead.
Killed by this very situation. My father died because vampires like Varek couldn't accept peace. Arya shot back. Because your politics matter more than people's lives. Because you'd rather fight each other than admit maybe the old ways aren't working anymore. She turned in a slow circle, looking at all of them. Western Court, Eastern Court, the uncertain faces of vampires who'd lived centuries, but maybe hadn't really thought about what they were living for. The blood dead ends tonight, Arya said. Not because I'm dying, not because Valen's dying, but because we're choosing to end it. No more bloodline obligation. No more guilt. No more debt.
Just
freedom. You can't just end a blood debt. Cassandra's voice came from the shadows. The former general stepped into view, her face gaunt, her eyes haunted. The bond is sealed by blood and oath. Only death or the Crimson Hall can break it. Then take me there, Arya said immediately. To the Crimson Hall. Let them judge. Let them decide if a human and a vampire can choose their own fate. Arya, no. Valen grabbed her arm. The Crimson Hall is dangerous. They don't think like younger vampires. They see humans as what?
cattle?
Pets. Arya met his eyes. Then maybe it's time someone reminded them we're not. That we're brave and stubborn and capable of loving people, even vampire people, who everyone says we should fear. Silence fell over the warehouse yard. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, An ancient voice spoke from the warehouse entrance, a voice like wind over gravestones, like the whisper of dead leaves. How curious. A human requests audience with the Crimson Hall. Every vampire dropped to one knee. Even Valen, wounded as he was, knelt. A figure emerged from the darkness, so old that gender seemed irrelevant, with skin like parchment and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. They wore simple robes of deep crimson, and power radiated from them like heat from a furnace. Lord Erebus, Valen said, had bowed. We didn't know the Crimson Hall was watching. The hall watches everything, young king. Especially upheavals that threaten our kind's survival. Those ancient eyes fixed on Arya, the only person still standing.
You.
Child of the Chun bloodline. You truly wish to stand before the council? Arya's knees wanted to buckle. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But she thought of her father, giving his blood to save a vampire. Of her great-great-grandfather pulling Valen from a burning church. Of 5 generations of Chens choosing courage over fear.
Yes, she said. Ido.
Lord Erebus smiled, a terrible, knowing expression. Then you shall have your audience. At the Crimson Hall, 3 nights hence, at the dark of the moon they looked at Valen. Bring her, and pray the council finds her. Amusing. And if they don't, Kieran asked before he could stop himself. Then she dies. And the blood debt ends the old-fashioned way, in blood and fire and screaming. Erebus's smile widened. But what an entertaining death it would be. They vanished, simply ceasing to exist, leaving only the scent of old earth and older magic. Arya's legs finally gave out. Valen caught her, both of them supporting each other, 2 people bound by blood and fate and something neither had asked for but couldn't escape. You just invited judgment from beings who make me look young, Valen said quietly. They could kill you with a thought. Then we'd better prepare a very good argument. Arya looked up at him. 3 days to figure out how to end a 138-year-old blood debt without either of us dying. Think we can do it? Valen laughed. Exhausted, pained, but genuine. With you, I'm starting to believe anything is possible. Around them, vampires slowly rose from their knees. The Western court began to retreat, carrying Varric's unconscious form. The crisis wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, there was a fragile peace. And 3 days to accomplish the impossible. Can you walk? Arya asked. If you can, Valen replied. They walked together through the crowd of vampires, through the ruins of the warehouse where Daniel Chun had first saved a vampire's life, out into the night that held both danger and hope in equal measure. Behind them, Marcus began organizing guards. Kieran started planning their journey. Cassandra watched from the shadows, still banished, but unable to look away. And somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, in a hall built of crimson stone and old bones, the ancient council prepared to judge whether love and choice were stronger than blood and debt. 3 days. The countdown had begun. The Crimson Hall was not a building, it was a wound in the earth. Arya stood at the entrance of a massive cave system carved into the Appalachian Mountains, watching vampires emerge from the darkness like ghosts. Not dozens, hundreds. The ancient council had summoned witnesses from every court in North America, every bloodline, every clan. They want to make an example of us, Valen said beside her. He'd spent the last 3 days recovering, letting Arya's blood, given freely in small amounts, heal the silver poisoning. But he was still weak, and they both knew it. Win or lose, the hall wants everyone to see what happens when ancient law is challenged. Then let's give them a show worth watching. Arya squeezed his hand, feeling his cool fingers wrap around hers. Marcus and Kieran flanked them, along with what remained of Valen's loyal guard, maybe 20 vampires against the hundreds gathering inside. Even Cassandra had appeared at dawn, silent and watchful, neither ally nor enemy, but unable to stay away. They descended into the earth. The path spiraled down through caverns lit by bioluminescent fungi and torches that burned with blue flame. Vampire glyphs covered the walls, the history of their kind, written in blood and stone. Arya saw images of ancient battles, of the first vampires rising, of humans and vampires locked in eternal conflict. At the bottom, the Crimson Hall itself opened before them. It was a natural amphitheater of red stone, large enough to hold 1,000 vampires. Ancient pillars rose to a ceiling lost in shadow. And at the center, on a raised platform of black marble, sat the 5 members of the Old Council. Lord Erebus, who had summoned them, sat in the middle. To their left was a woman who looked carved from mice, her white hair flowing to the ground. To their right, a man whose skin was dark as midnight, covered in scarification that glowed faintly. The other 2 council members were harder to look at. Their forms seemed to shift and blur, as if they existed slightly out of phase with reality. Valen Aurelius, Erebus's voice echoed through the chamber. King of the Eastern Courts. You stand accused of corrupting human blood with vampire essence, creating an aberration against natural law. How do you plead? Not guilty, Valen said clearly. I gave blood to save a dying man. The Chen family's unusual reaction to vampire essence was not my doing, but their own unique biology. Yet you perpetuated it, the Ice Woman said. Her voice was brittle, sharp. 5 generations. Each time a Chen saved your life, you bound them deeper. You created a bloodline of half-breeds. They're not. Arya started, but Marcus grabbed her arm. Don't speak unless addressed, he whispered urgently. They'll kill you for the disrespect. Let her speak, the midnight-skinned counselor leaned forward. I would hear what this human has to say. It has been centuries since one stood before us. All eyes turned to Arya. 1,000 vampires, watching, waiting, many hoping she'd fail so they could watch her die. Arya thought of her father, of his courage, of 5 generations of Chens who'd chosen to help instead of hate. I'm not an aberration, she said, voice shaking but clear. I'm the result of kindness. My great-great-grandfather saved a vampire from burning because he believed everyone deserved mercy. Each generation after made the same choice, not because of magic or obligation, but because they saw someone worth saving. Sentiment, the Ice Woman said dismissively. Human emotion. Irrelevant. Is it? Arya took a step forward, ignoring Marcus's hiss of warning. You call it corruption, but what if it's evolution? What if humans and vampires don't have to be enemies? My father and Valen were friends, real friends, for 20 years. Doesn't that prove coexistence is possible? Your father is dead, Erebus observed. Killed by the very situation his kindness created. My father died because vampires like Varek can't accept change. Arya's voice rose. Because your old laws prioritize power over people. He died trying to save both me and Valen from a system that says one of us has to die. And yet here you both stand, the Midnight Counselor said thoughtfully. Bound by blood. Dying by inches. The debt consuming you both, he looked at Valen. Why not simply complete the ritual? Take her blood, her essence, her life. Save yourself. Because she's not mine to take, Valen said quietly. She's a person, not a resource. And I've spent 300 years learning that survival without conscience isn't survival, it's just existence. Pretty words from a dying king, the Ice Woman sneered. You've grown weak, Valen, corrupted by human sentiment. Perhaps your death would remind our kind why we don't form attachments to mortals. Then kill me, Valen said, and the chamber went deathly silent. I offer myself for judgment. Let Arya go free, untouched, her bloodline released from all obligation. Take my life in payment for whatever laws I've broken.
No.
Arya lunged forward, but Kieran caught her. You can't. We came here to break the bond, not. There is another option. One of the shifting counselors spoke for the first time, their voice like whined through empty rooms.
A test.
To prove whether this
bond
is corruption or evolution. What kind of test? Valen asked warily. The counselor smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Trial by essence. You both claim the bond is based on choice, on mutual sacrifice. Prove it. Let us see which of you loves the other more. Arya felt ice flood her veins. What does that mean? It means, Erebus said, leaning forward with terrible interest, that we will place both of you in the ritual circle. Your blood, his essence, both freely given. But here's the twist. Only one of you can survive. The ritual will take the life force of whoever holds back, whoever hesitates, whoever loves themselves more than the other. That's insane, Marcus breathed. You're asking them to prove their bond is real, the Midnight Counselor finished. If they truly choose each other over themselves, the bond will break clean. One dies willingly, one lives free. But if either hesitates, if doubt enters their heart, both will die in agony as the ritual tears them apart. Arya looked at Valen and saw understanding dawn in his crimson eyes. This was the Crimson Hall's judgment, not mercy, but cruelty dressed as justice. They would both pour their essence into the ritual, both try to sacrifice themselves, and whichever one held back even slightly would be consumed. It was a test neither could win, because neither would choose to survive at the other's expense. We accept, Valen said before Arya could speak. Valen, no. We accept, he repeated, his hand finding hers. Because I know the truth. Arya Chin will not let me die. And I will not let her die. And somewhere in that impossibility, we'll find a way. The council exchanged glances, and Arya saw something in their ancient faces, not cruelty, but curiosity. They genuinely wanted to see what would happen, wanted to see if love could break what centuries of law had established. Then let the trial begin, Erebus declared. Bring forth the ritual circle. Vampires moved with practiced precision, drawing symbols on the stone floor with liquid that glowed like captured starlight. The circle was massive, 20 feet across, covered in glyphs that hurt to look at directly. Arya and Valen were led to opposite sides of the circle. A blade was placed in each of their hands, ceremonial, wickedly sharp. When the moon reaches its zenith, Erebus explained, you will both cut your palms and let your blood flow into the circle. The ritual will activate, and your essences will merge. Whichever of you surrenders their life force completely, choosing death to save the other, will be consumed. The survivor goes free, bond broken, debt fulfilled. And if we both try to sacrifice ourselves? Arya asked. The Ice Woman actually laughed. Then you both die screaming, torn apart by competing magics. The bond breaks through mutual destruction, the very fate you were trying to avoid. Arya looked across the circle at Valen. Even now, wounded and exhausted, he stood tall. A king who'd ruled for 3 centuries, who'd survived wars and betrayals and the slow poison of guilt. And he was smiling at her, a sad, gentle smile that said, I'm sorry. I'm going to save you, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. No, she mouthed at him. Don't you dare. His smile widened. Watch me. High above, through gaps in the cavern ceiling, Arya could see the night sky. The moon was rising, approaching its zenith. They had maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes to figure out how to outsmart a ritual designed by vampires who'd been alive since before America existed. 5 minutes to save each other from themselves. Valen, she called across the circle. Do you remember what my father wrote? About why the debt was killing you. His brow furrowed. That it was guilt. Self-punishment. That you were choosing to die. Arya's mind raced. The debt responds to will.
To choice.
That's what makes it powerful. What if, she stopped, an impossible idea forming. What if we both choose life? The ritual requires a sacrifice. The Midnight Counselor started. The ritual requires a choice, Arya interrupted, too desperate to care about offending ancient vampires. One of us has to surrender completely. To give everything, she looked at Valen. What if we both surrender? Not our lives, our guilt, our pain. All the reasons we think we deserve to die instead of live. That's not, Erebus frowned. That's not how the ritual works. Isn't it? Valen's eyes lit with understanding. A sacrifice doesn't have to be death. It can be ego.
Pride.
The belief that we're somehow responsible for everyone who ever suffered because of us. He looked at the council. My guilt has been killing me for 138 years. What if I give that up instead? What if I choose to forgive myself? The 5 council members exchanged shocked glances. The ice woman struggled for words. That's brilliant, the midnight counselor said softly. And completely untested. It could work. Or it could kill you both instantly. The moon reached its zenith, and the circle flared to life, glowing with crimson light. Arya looked at Valen across the expanse of magic. Together? Together, he agreed. They cut their palms. Blood flowed. And everything went white.
Pain.
Not the sharp agony of a blade or the burning of silver poison, but something deeper. Arya felt her essence being pulled from her body like thread from a spool, every memory, every emotion, every moment of her life flowing into the circle of light. Across from her, Valen was dissolving. His form flickered like a candle flame in wind, crimson mist rising from his skin as his vampire essence poured into the ritual. Choose, the magic seemed to whisper. Choose who lives. Choose who dies. But Arya wasn't choosing death. She was choosing to let go. Every regret, every what if, every moment she'd blamed herself for not being enough, she gave it all to the circle. The guilt of not being there when her father died. The shame of being weak, human, helpless. The fear that she wasn't worth the sacrifice 5 generations of Chens had made. I forgive myself, she thought, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Across the circle, Valen was doing the same. She could feel it through their bond, him releasing 300 years of survivor's guilt. The weight of everyone who died to save him. The shame of being the monster humans feared. The burden of being a king when all he'd wanted was to be a person. I forgive myself, his thoughts echoed hers. The ritual shuddered. This wasn't what it was designed for. It wanted a life, wanted death, wanted the clean ending of sacrifice and suffering. But they were giving it something else. Something it had never tasted. Freedom. The crimson light exploded outward, and Arya felt herself falling, not down but sideways, into a space between moments where time moved differently. She saw everything. Her great-great-grandfather pulling Valen from the burning church, their eyes meeting across flames, mutual recognition of kindness in a cruel world. Her grandfather giving blood to cure silver poisoning, Valen weeping as he drank, both of them understanding the weight of the debt they were creating. Her uncle dying to save Valen from an ambush, his last words, tell him it was worth it. Her father, 20 years ago, bleeding himself nearly to death in that warehouse, and Valen catching him as he fell, both of them laughing through tears at the absurdity of a vampire and a human becoming brothers. And now her, the last Chen, the end of the line. Or the beginning of something new, a voice whispered, not the councils, not the rituals, but something older. The magic itself, curious about these 2 strange beings who'd chosen to break its rules. The light dimmed. Arya found herself on her knees on cold stone, gasping. Her palm was still bleeding, but the wound was closing as she watched, healing faster than it should, but not vampire fast. Human fast, just enhanced. Across the circle, Valen collapsed forward, caught by Marcus and Kieran. His skin was still pale, his eyes still crimson, but something had changed. He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Impossible, the ice woman breathed. Not impossible, the midnight counselor said, leaning forward with fascination. Just unprecedented. Look at the circle. The glowing symbols were rewriting themselves, ancient glyphs shifting into new patterns. Where there had been bindings and obligations, now there were only connections freely chosen, easily broken, held together by nothing but choice. The blood debt is gone, Erebus said slowly, as if not quite believing their own words. Completely severed. But the bond remains, transformed into something we have no name for. Friendship, Arya said, still catching her breath. The name is friendship. Impossible, the Ice Woman repeated. Humans and vampires cannot be. And yet, Valen interrupted, rising on shaking legs. Here we are.
Alive.
Both of us. The debt fulfilled not through death, but through choice. He looked at the council. My guilt nearly destroyed us both. But Arya showed me that surviving isn't a crime. Living isn't something I need to apologize for. The Chun bloodline is free, the Midnight Counselor declared. The blood debt, spanning 138 years and 5 generations, is satisfied. Valen Aurelius, you are released from your oath. Arya Chun, you are released from your burden. Silence fell over the Crimson Hall. 1,000 vampires processed what they'd just witnessed, the impossible made real. Then, slowly, one vampire began to clap. Then another. Then dozens, hundreds, until the sound echoed through the cavern like thunder. Not all of them approved. Arya saw plenty of hostile faces, vampires who still believed the old ways were best. But enough had witnessed something that changed them. Enough had seen that maybe, just maybe, there was another path forward. This session is concluded, Erebus said, and Arya could have sworn she saw approval in those ancient eyes. Let it be recorded that on this night, the impossible occurred. And let our kind remember that even the oldest debts can be paid with something other than death. 3 weeks later, Arya stood in Hollow Grove Cemetery at dawn, placing flowers on 2 graves side by side. Her father's stone was weathered now, the granite beginning to age. Next to it, she'd had a second stone placed, not for a body, but for memory. It read, Valen Aurelius, friend to the Chun family, 1687 to 2025. He's not dead, you know, a familiar voice said. Arya turned to find Valen approaching through the morning mist, 20 figures in black coats following at a respectful distance. His honor guard, still loyal despite his abdication. Despite everything. I know, Arya said. But the man who carried that blood debt for 138 years? That version of you is gone. Seemed worth memorializing. Valen smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, no longer weighted by centuries of guilt. Your father would have found that poetic. And ridiculous. He would have Arya pulled something from her pocket, her father's pocket watch. It had stopped ticking the night of the ritual, the hands frozen at exactly midnight. She placed it on Valen's memorial stone. For the vampire king who learned to be just a person. And what am I now? Valen asked, genuinely curious. Not quite human, not quite the king I was. Marcus leads the Eastern courts. I'm just me. You're free, Arya said. We both are. She turned to leave, but Valen caught her hand. Where will you go? Back to your cubicle? Your sandwich shop.
Arya laughed.
Actually, I was thinking of traveling. There's a whole world out there, and I've spent my whole life in Boston. Maybe I'll visit Europe. See where your story started. All those centuries ago. Dangerous for a human alone. Good thing I know some vampires who owe me a favor then. She squeezed his hand, warm now. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to the coolness of his skin. Wanna come? See the world not as a king, but as whatever you want to be. Valen looked at his memorial stone, at her father's grave, at the rising sun that no longer hurt him because he'd finally forgiven himself for surviving it. Yes, he said. I think I would. As they walked away, side by side, a single red rose appeared on Arya's father's grave, placed by no visible hand, blooming despite the October cold. And on Valen's memorial stone, the pocket watch ticked once. Just once. Then fell silent forever. Behind them, the 20 vampires followed at a distance, no longer guards serving a king, but friends protecting someone they'd chosen to care about. Marcus and Kieran. Even Cassandra, who'd appeared one night to apologize and been welcomed back without question. They were an odd group, certainly. Humans and vampires, bound not by magic or debt, but by the simple choice to walk the same path. Above them, the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And for the first time in 300 years, Val and Aurelius watched a sunrise without guilt, without fear, without the weight of debts unpaid. Just watched it because it was beautiful. "Thank you," he said quietly to Arya. "For what?" "For showing me that the best way to honor the dead isn't to join them. It's to live. Really live." He looked at her, crimson eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "Your father gave me life 5 times across the decades. But you gave me a reason to want it." Arya smiled, thinking of her father's last letter, of his final sacrifice to free them both. He knew. Somehow, he knew that saving you meant saving me too. That we'd save each other. They walked on through the cemetery, through the gates, out into a world that held both darkness and light, danger and hope, endings and beginnings all tangled together. Behind them, on a grave marked with a fresh red rose, a small plaque caught the morning sun. Added just that morning, it read, "The debt is paid. The line is protected. The story continues." And in the shadows between the headstones, if you looked carefully, you might have seen a figure, tall and kind-faced, with a crooked smile, watching them go. Daniel Chen, or perhaps just a trick of the light, raising a hand in final farewell. The debt was fulfilled. But the friendship, that was just beginning.
The end.